My name is Michaela Yearwood-Dan and you're here today in my East London studio for Hospital Rooms Digital Art School. And today we will be making some paper flowers. You will need some crepe paper, some pieces of cut up crepe paper, inks, coffee, brushes, glue, an object to smooth, wire, foil, markers, pencils and water. I got really into making paper flowers last year ahead of my wedding, and I thought that it'd be a really lovely thing to share with you guys to brighten up your spring. So the first step will be preparing some crepe paper for your petals. I use Italian crepe paper, and you can get that at any craft store or online, but if you're joining with Hospital Rooms and you have one of our digital art school packs, you'll have some pieces cut up, ready to use and get dyeing. So I'm going to show you 3 different ways to dye some paper. You can use the paper as it is, but I always think it's nicer to dye so you have an individual touch to it. If you don't have scissors, you can easily do it without scissors. What you want to do is stretch out the crepe paper so it's easier to fold and tear, folding it together and tearing it. One of the first ways I like to dye paper is with inks and coffee. And to dye it with inks, what you will need in your cup is a small bit of water and some different coloured inks. I'm going to use a few pumps of this red water-soluble ink. As well as some of this pink to really amp up the vibrancy. Get a little shake around and a little mix. And what you then do is you get some of the paper which absorbs the colour really nicely and just give it a little swirl. And it will dye the tips of the paper. And then you just want to put it to stand upright in another cup or lay it on a piece of tissue so that you can let it dry that way instead. Another way to dye your paper is with coffee. So what I like to do is add this kind of brown coffee colour onto the ends of pinks to make it feel almost like a wilting flower. So you do the same thing with the coffee. And what's nice about this is that you can also dip it into the ink as well to add to the depth of the colour. You can do different things where you pour the inks, so you can pour some of the coffee over the top to really add extra depth to the paper that you're creating, or just leave it as so. And then the last option, which some of you might not have the equipment to do it with, is to add a small bit of bleach to some water. So if you're doing this at home and you don't have a parent or anyone present, or if you don't have any bleach, don't worry about this. Coffee and inks are perfectly fine. But pour some bleach into this water And what this will do is strip the colour of the ink from the paper that you already have. And you can see that the tips are becoming lighter than the bottom, ever so slightly, but it develops over time. And in time, the colour will develop like this once it's dried. So we have your bleach dyed flower paper, your coffee in ink, and your just ink. And what you want to do is put those to side and let them dry. You can either let them dry naturally or use a hairdryer. I often do them the day before and come back the next day to work on them then. So you can make your own special coloured paper easily just by dyeing it with things you have around the house. And you can use loads of different colour inks. So if you wanted to make some blue flowers, for instance, or some really lovely turquoise ones, you can mix and match with your inks and do whatever you want. Just make sure you want to keep the base colour kind of neutral for taking in as much of the colour as possible. So the next step is that we're going to be creating the pieces for the middle of the flower, all the nice yellow pieces. So what we first want to do is to cut a strip of paper, yellow crepe paper, and like I said before, if you don't have scissors, you just have to stretch out the paper so that it's easier to tear and tear along. So to make the inside bits, what you first need to do is to stretch out your paper nice and flat. So you want to make sure that you've got as flat of a surface as you can. And then taking some PVA glue and a brush, what you want to do is you want to spread glue on about half of the piece of paper. And once you spread the glue, you then want to fold over the non-glue side on top of the glue covered side. And at this point, you can flatten down with your hands, like so, or use, I have here a rubber tool, or I just have a membership card for a gallery, and you can just smooth it right over so you've got something nice and smooth here. What will happen with this piece of paper is that now that it's doubled over time, it will get thicker and harden up because of the PVA glue inside the two sides of paper, which will make a really nice texture for the middle of the flower that feels a little bit, more robust. The next piece of thing that you have to do for the middle section is to have very small, thin pieces of the yellow crepe paper. You'll stretch that out again. And this time, what we want to do is to simply twist. And you want to twist really nice, tight pieces of paper. This will be used inside the middle of the flower as a little cross section. And if your fingers start getting a little bit dry, just dip it into water and go again, and it helps make it a little bit easier to twist. You can do the same thing by tearing a small section of paper and twisting again, so don't worry. We're going to have 6 crossover sections, so you need 3 pieces of this thin piece of crepe paper. And each of them will be about 3 to 4 centimeters long. And just pause here if you need to catch up. So we're now going to move on to making the central part of the flower by creating a circular section for the top of the flower itself. like so. And onwards. I made one a little earlier. What we'll then need to do is cover the stems in some green crepe paper. The first thing I do is to take a triangle piece, smooth it out and cover it in PVA glue. PVA goes a really long way, so you don't actually have to use too much of it. And with these kind of things, I think the thinner the better, as long as the whole area is covered. And then what we will do is we'll take the flat side and coat it round the base of the flower there, taking it over to the top and wrapping this triangle bit around the base of the ball section at the top. And then a longer section to wrap down the rest of the stem. So now we're going to start building the inside section of your flowers. So by that I mean all these lovely frilly bits here and the cross section that I spoke about earlier when we made our little pieces for them. So let's start with the cross section. So I'm going to take my tinfoil covered central flower piece, and what I'm going to do, and this bit can be a little bit messy and a little bit sticky, but you know, that's the best part about making crafts, I think. And so I want to spread some glue over the top, across the middle. And for this, you can have it quite thickly applied, and you want it to go down the stem a little bit. So then what we do is take one of your pieces of twisted paper, and you want to put one piece there, just at the one edge of the stem, push it in tightly, and guide it along that piece, that line of wet glue, and over to the other side. And then we'll hold it in place. I'd say about 30 seconds. And then before it's dry, you're more than able to start working on putting down the other pieces. So for this, you want a kind of a cross section. So one goes from, if it was a clock, this one would be going from 12 to 6. And then you want another piece that's going across from 2 to 8. You want to take this one 2 to 8 across and hold them all down. Give them a big squeeze in. And then you want another one going across from 10 till 4. The best thing about using PVA glue is that it dries clear. So don't worry if this feels or looks a bit messy, because it ultimately will be clear and you won't be able to see any of it. And at this point, what you would do usually is to let it dry a little bit whilst you make the rest of your inside of the flower. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to make the little pollen stems that are inside a flower usually. So remember your nice piece of glued together paper from earlier. What you want to do is trim that down so that you have a nice even spread across. So we're going to trim this down a little bit. And this is what I would say is the perfect length and perfect size to wrap around your flower. What I like to do at this point, just to add a little bit extra va-va-voom, I guess, is to add some colour to these pieces of paper so that they look like they've got pollen on each of the little pieces of stem. So for that, what I'll do is I'll get an orange pencil and I just colour in the edge of the paper on both sides. You can also do this with pan pastels, which are these lovely pastel pigments that I have here in the studio. And all you need for those is a little brush, and they just brush nicely right on to the material. And you can use oil pastels, watercolor paint, and acrylic would work well. You just want to make sure the acrylic isn't too thick, so maybe a little bit watered down. And with these, they give a nice little dust, just like pollen, so you can blow that off and you've got a lovely inside. And then I also like to add a little bit of green so it looks like it's kind of grown straight out from the flower. And for that, I usually just get a green pen or a green pencil, and I just do a nice little line like this. It doesn't have to be neat. Don't worry about that at all. It can be kind of as scruffy or messy as you want, but you just want to make sure that you can see the clear distinction between the pollen area, the stem area, and the base area. And you can use pan pastels for this as well. But really and truly with this kind of thing, you can kind of use whatever you've got lying around in terms of like paints and stuff. So don't worry if you don't have exactly the same things as me. You're all incredible geniuses and you'll figure out what you could use instead. And then what we do, and this bit is weirdly one of my favourite pieces, and I think it's because I like doing little tedious tasks, is we want to snip thin little layers all the way along, starting on your orange end side. And these will all come together at the top to create all the lovely little stems of pollen. So if you do that all the way along. And there's another option if you don't have scissors, which is to do the same thing on your pieces of torn up paper. So what we'll do is tear the paper down to the length that we need. And for this, you want to tear sort of just under a centimetre width apart and about 2 centimetres down, pieces of paper like this. And then what you'll do is similar to the pieces of paper that you made for the cross section, is give them a nice little twist around. And remember, if your finger's feeling a bit dry from all the other bits of craft, you can just rub a teeny bit of water on them just to help move things along. But you can do that all the way along and it'll work just the same as what I've just done with the cutting pieces of paper on the other little piece of doubled over crepe paper. Feel free to pause now if you're still catching up and go back if you need to and look over the steps one more time. So now your central section is all dry, you want to then attach your lovely little pollen stems. So what I'm going to do is spread glue right along the base over here. And for some added security, I always like to sort of add a little bit across the bottom here. And then you start wrapping it around your middle section. So I'm wrapping it quite close to the stem at the bottom of the middle bulbous bit of the flower. And as you go around, you can give a little squeeze as you push them in together. And there you have it. And then you want to make sure to let that dry. And now we're going to make the petals, the most vital part of bringing the flower together. So I'm going to pick some of this lovely bleached and dyed paper that I made earlier. So what we want to do for this is you want to pull your paper so it's nice and stretched out. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you both how to tear the paper and also how to cut the paper to make your perfect petal shapes. When I'm making petals, I like to freehand cut them, but we'll also include a little template for a half petal or a full petal. So taking your piece of paper that's been nicely stretched out, what I want you to do is fold over in half, and then fold over in half again, and then fold over in half one more time, if it allows, as long as it will fit that template size on. So then what you want to do is you want to cut the perfect shape for a perfect flower. And now what you will have are multiple petal shapes. So with tearing the paper to make your petal shape, it's just as easy. So you want to get your piece of paper, you want to fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. And we're going to start at the bottom by tearing a little slice there, and then bringing it up to tear the shape of the flower. So what you'll do is use one thumb to kind of guide you and hold it in place, and then kind of with your nail end of your other thumb, you want to kind of anchor that down and tear from that position. And that's what will give you the best tears when you're doing this. And then you still have lovely petal shapes. This next step might seem a little odd, but it's really important for the process. So you want to take your flower and you want to twist it up like this and scrunch it up a little bit. Just, this bit's quite good because you get to be a bit rough. And then once those are all done, the reason you do this is because when you unfold the paper, it now has this lovely kind of crinkled effect, just like a petal would. So what we want to do is taking that little base at the bottom of each of the flowers, just want to put a small amount of PVA glue on each of them, just like a little bit right at the bottom. And with these, you'll give them each a little pinch inwards onto themselves and then flat them down. So it's a pinch together and then a pinch to flatten. So now, as one of the best bits, we can now bring our flower to life and assemble it all. So I've got some of our folded, cut flowers and some of our torn flowers over here, and they're all being pressed together nicely. And what we'll do is now take a little bit of glue at the bottom, so around about that amount and that high up, about sort of centimetre high up. And you want to place each of the petals around the base section, and then each flower petal we are going to slightly overlap the previous one. So if you can see it there, slightly overlap here, so there are no gaps and it forms together really nicely. And each of them get a nice little squeeze like you did earlier, just to push in and make sure that glue is nice and dry. And then when they're all down together, you want to give them a nice squeeze and hold, just so that glue is setting right in. And then the very final step in bringing this full flower to life is taking a small scrap, maybe about 2 or 3 centimeters of the stretched green fabric that you had earlier that you used to wrap around the whole stem, just to cover up the base where you have joined all the petals to the rest of the flower. And you follow the same kind of process that you did before. And there you have it, your very own poppy. So you've got your nice flower. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can also make a leaf to sit alongside it like I did here. And for that, it's super simple and easy. 2 ways you can do it. You either get 2 triangle pieces of paper and a piece of wire. So what you do here is then you take some glue down the middle, wire in the place of the glue, and another piece of paper to cover it up. Obviously, this doesn't look like a leaf yet, and you let this dry. You can then cut around it into leaf shape. And then when you have your fully formed leaf, what you can then do is place it nicely and firmly against your flower, and similarly like you did with the rest of the petals, take some glue and a piece of paper and cover up the little working outs. And then snip off the excess wire. And if you want to do it without wire, what you would then do is tear 2 leaf shapes, glue them together, putting glue on one side and folding over. And if you want, you can also draw on some of the little lines of a leaf. Wait for that to dry so it's a little bit more rigid. And do the same thing. And get a bit of glue and stick it right on the edge of your ready put together flower. So here is my finished flower. It's an Icelandic poppy, and I really enjoyed making it with you guys at Hospital Rooms Digital Art School. If you look at the link below, you can upload them to the gallery, whether you're at home, at a mental health unit, school, or making them with your family and friends. We'd love to see your paper flowers.